Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we wrap up our Werewolves of Summer retrospective. This has been a return to classic werewolf movies, new and old, with Neil Marshall's 2002 action horror film, Dog Soldiers. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Howdy.
Howdy. And from Los Angeles tonight, Adam Foshko, writer and creative consultant for Activision's Call of Duty Exo Zombies, the explosive new episodic Zombie Fest starring John Malkovich, Bill Baxton, John Bernthal, Rose McGowan, and Bruce Campbell. Also, as well, he's a screenwriter for the upcoming Skylanders Superchargers due out later this year. Say hello, Adam.
Hello.
Hello. And finally, also joining us from Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hi, guess what? You just mentioned Bruce Campbell, and there's actually a character in this movie. One of the soldiers is called Bruce Campbell in honor of Bruce Campbell.
Oh, that's groovy.
Yeah.
That's groovy. As Bruce
What
Campbell
does he know?
Yes. Okay, according to Wikipedia, Dog Soldiers is a 2002 British horror comedy film, so-called. I would call it military horror. A British military horror film written and directed by Neil Marshall and starring Kevin McKidd, Sean Pertwee, and Darren Morfitt. A British production set in the Highlands of Scotland. It was filmed almost entirely in Luxembourg. In the U.S., it premiered as a Sci-Fi Pictures film on the Sci-Fi Channel.
I can't hear the Highlands of Scotland without thinking, he is immortal. Born in the Highlands of Scotland 400 years ago, he is not alone.
Good Lord.
There could be only one. And, of course, thank you, Luxembourg, for your glorious act.
Duncan MacLeod, the Highlander. It's not even the movie. That's from the...
We watched all 7 years of that. And so,
yeah, and we met. Oh, my gosh. Well, I'll tell the story later.
That is totally... as awesome as
wow.
all that is, it's far afield.
I'll tell the story later. Later in this episode.
All right.
Later in this episode.
Okay. So let's get our opening thoughts about anything but Highlander. All right. Opening thoughts, Dog Soldiers. Drew, you are our host, in a sense, to this werewolf series. You have created this playlist. You brought us all the way back to Werewolf of London. Now you've brought us all the way forward to Dog Soldiers. So lay it on us. Give it to about a minute so we can shoot through all these opening thoughts and get to it. But why are we here, and why do you like this movie?
Well, to paraphrase Bruce Campbell, the much-mentioned Bruce Campbell, welcome to the 21st century. I wanted to do this particular movie because I feel like this shows you, we went from Werewolf of London to The Howling, through Company of Wolves, and into this to show you how much werewolves have changed on screen to where you can do a werewolf movie at this point where, in fact, you never actually see the werewolves in human form, with one rare exception. That the werewolf who is actually the classic werewolf, who is both the protagonist and the antagonist, we are at a point where we don't need that anymore. A werewolf movie can actually just be about people fighting werewolves. And this movie is essentially a war movie. It follows all the tropes of a war movie. It just happens that the enemy combatants are big, scary, upright wolves played by ballerinas. And what a fun movie this is. Yes. What a fun movie this is. I am really glad to close out on this. I've enjoyed all the movies that we've done for this for various reasons, but this is probably my favorite 21st century werewolf movie. And it's funny because the werewolves are not really what I enjoy about it. I enjoy the relationships between the soldiers. I think that this is a very good character-based movie in a lot of respects, which I'm sure we will go further into.
Outstanding. Okay, Julia, so lay it on us. What did you like? What didn't you like? What are your opening thoughts, Dog Soldiers?
You'll probably be disappointed, but my opening thought is that I was so excited to see Kevin McKidd because he plays Owen Hunt on Grey's Anatomy. So I was just like, yay, Owen! So then I kind of got distracted by that. But after I got over the fact that it was Owen, I think, I don't know, I have pretty mixed feelings about it. It's a little bloodier than I like. I'm not a big fan of gore, even though Jason and I had a good long debate about whether this was really gory because he could name a lot of movies that were more gory. And I said, just because it's not at the end of the gore spectrum does not mean it's not gory. But anyway,
right.
So for me, that's kind of a turn off. But, I thought it was kind of interesting and fun to the way that the story went. And the werewolves are kind of cool. They're not CGI, so they're different than the ones that we've been seeing. And I don't know, kind of interesting. So, I think there's the good highlights and not so much.
Outstanding. All right, Adam, and let's see. Well, I mean, we were talking beforehand about the curious case of the launching of this movie. So, but getting to the film itself, because I know we're going to get to how this movie came out and various things. But what are your thoughts on the film itself?
Well, this is definitely a film. In fact, part of me as I was looking at it, I was watching it, I really kind of thought, this probably lived for a time as a short, because it has all the elements in it that's like, okay, I could see this having been a short once upon a time. As Drew said, this is definitely an action soldiering picture, sort of platoon against platoon, special forces guys, up in the northern part of the UK. And it's that fundamentally, it's that primarily. They just add werewolves. You could literally take, the werewolves out, and you would have a perfectly good, soldiering picture, guys picture. And I think this is a move. Partly, I kind of heard it billed once as, a little bit of Jaws, a little bit of, a war picture, a little bit of Aliens, a little bit of werewolves, kind of mixed together. So what I like about it is it really is a blend of genres. It's like 80% war picture, 20% werewolves, and kind of the survival horror thing sort of mixed in, towards the back half of it. And, considering the fact that it's clearly a budgeted picture. They shot in Luxembourg, with amazing tax breaks. And that's really sort of the Luxembourg thing, and they shot in different places. But, it's good to see John Pertwee's son. Shout out to the Doctor Who fans. So it was really good to kind of see that. I like it for those reasons. As a werewolf picture, as a pure werewolf picture, I tend to like a little bit more of the, not magical realism, but a little bit more of the tropes kind of mixed into it as well. If you made it 50-50, I would have been a little bit happier probably. But I think it's a good one to watch. I think it's important for those reasons. Maybe not be my favorite picture, but it's actually a film. This is a film. But I'm really glad that I had seen it. And I think it holds up. I think it's one of those things that, considering it was made a dozen or so years ago, that it feels just as good as it did sort of when it came out. So I think it's good. It's not one for everyone, but I think this is also a film that might appeal to people who don't 100% love full on werewolf pictures, but like action, and maybe this is the kind of mix that it tends to reach a broader audience, and I think that's important when you start mixing genres. I think that's a very interesting trend that we're starting to see with Firefly and other things. The idea of mixing genres more and more, and I think this is a fabulous example of that.
It's really fabulous. I mean, as far as that concept, that I think when I saw this movie in 2002, it is an amazing hybrid of horror and military, and that's why I would call it military horror. And I think there are a few things that fit into that. Drew mentioned earlier, and Drew, I'm going to steal your thunder, but I'll quote you directly. You said the thing that this reminded you a lot of was Aliens, and it very much is that, because
it drinks very deeply of the Aliens well.
You've got a bunch of guys who are well trained. They're doing their military thing. They're using their military jargon. They're bantering with one another, and they've got all their gear and they're in their awesome outfits. So it has this very, very, if you're into G.I. Joe or if you're into any of those action kind of stories, then you'll see that, and then they're going to fight essentially an army of monsters. And yeah, Aliens did that, and this does that, and so generally you're not going to screw around. And it's not even the level of horror like that the original Alien was, where you're being stalked slowly. This is one actiony, suspensey sort of set piece after another, and it's I was really impressed.
The thing that this does really illustrate, since it's soldiers versus werewolves. Werewolves are the walking tank of the monster world because they are so freaking hard to kill. And this movie really illustrates that very well. Yeah, and there's also, we've seen a lot of movies that are like Fort Apache, the Bronx, or whatever, where people end up for most of the film sort of hunkered down in one location, one position that they have to defend over and over again, and that's what's going on here. For the bulk of the film, we'll get into the plot here a little bit, but for the bulk of the film, it's going to be a military siege between the guys who are in the bunker and the guys who are coming after the bunker. We've seen that plot. There's a great movie called The Nest, which is a French terrorist versus soldiers thriller that is just like edge of your seat good when you watch it. And it's almost the same, except instead of werewolves, it's terrorists. So this Assault on Precinct 13 is also, in the horror genre, we see this sort of scenario a lot in zombie films where people bunker down in a place to fight off the living dead. And in fact, there was a point in time where almost every zombie movie essentially followed that plot line. The difference being is they were usually civilians, and here we have highly trained military men who find that all their military training is more or less useless while fighting werewolves.
Well, what's interesting is you can tell that this is definitely geared to the action genre, because now you're looking at werewolves that can actually throw a punch, which I've never seen before.
Yeah.
These are werewolves throwing a punch? Really? I've never seen that. That's really unusual.
And they also deal with the notion in this movie that for whatever reasons, I guess for budgetary reasons or whatever, they try not to give you a good look at the werewolves much. Most of the time the wolves are like running behind trees.
Or they're in like shadow. You're seeing the silhouette.
And because the wolves are not that animated. I mean, they can't. Their arms don't necessarily move in a lot of directions and stuff. So a lot of it's done just with like quick cutting and various illusions. Hey, I can dig that. It works for me. The movie only has to work for like 90 minutes, and so if you could figure out a way to keep me excited and just keep doing these like directorial sleights of hand to keep showing me the whole wolf, fine. I'm totally good with that. This is a movie that knows that it's going on a timer. It's going with almost a real-time feel through the film, and that means that there's no way they're going to like slow down to like show you anything on the level of what The Howling did, where they would just slow down.
Well, because it's not, it is not a classic werewolf picture, and that's actually why I picked this movie over, say, Ginger Snaps, which is another excellent 21st century werewolf movie that follows more the tropes of a werewolf movie, but because I wanted to show you how mutated this genre had become by the time we reached this point in history, I felt like that this was a better example.
Yeah, no, it is. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about, I want to talk about how this movie came to be, because it's kind of strange. The film was made in Britain, and I have no idea if it got a theatrical release in Great Britain. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But Adam and I were racking our brains trying to remember, because the fact is, I remember that Tony Salvaggio, who's oftentimes one of our co-hosts, actually think, Adam, you're subbing for Tony right now. Anyway, Tony and I, like, were involved in bringing this movie to Austin for some reason. I remember that we actually introduced the producer at a showing at the Alamo Draft House, and Adam, I remember you and I were meeting with them over some stuff because for various licenses that these guys had.
A completely different set of meetings, yeah.
But the thing is, that was a set of meetings in Los Angeles. But what's strange is the movie wasn't out yet. I think it was about to come out. But all of that is like it's like I'm seeing it through the bottom of a pond or something. It's so long ago that I have no memory. But what I do remember is that they had a really great. This was a great film. I was really happy with it. I'd never seen anything like it before, and they were showing it at the Alamo, and they were about to put it out. And I think what happened was they ended up going and releasing it on the Sci-Fi Channel, and this is not something they would have ever discussed with me. I mean, geez, I'm just a writer, but I know that they could have held out and gotten a theatrical release. I really think that that's possible. There's no reason this could have come out. If freaking Sleepwalkers can come out, in the theaters, then this could have come out in the theaters. There's no reason they had to sell this straight to Sci-Fi Channel. But so it goes. I mean, I guess.
This was a movie that had buzz because I remember hearing or reading about it in a lot of the horror magazines at the time.
Absolutely. And you have some names. I mean, I don't know what Sean Pertwee was doing at the time, but first of all, that's a famous name in the genre universe. And, and he's really good. And maybe, I don't know, maybe he was famous at the time. I have no idea. Kevin the Kid was not one.
I like him from Elementary. He was Lestrade in Elementary.
Yeah, now he's Lestrade in Elementary.
Really
but I think one reason why it may not have come out in theaters here is because of the accents. That's really possible.
By the way, Sean Pertwee's character is called Sergeant Harry G. Wells in honor of H.G. Wells.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That is really neat. No, I mean, we watched very recently Sunshine on Leith. I can say that Sunshine on Leith was my favorite film of 2013. It's a Scottish musical. It takes place entirely in just various. Actually, I think it's all in Edinburgh in Scotland, and it's all it's a musical, and it was great, funny, everything. But the reason it didn't get released in the United States, chiefly that I've heard, is that people found that the accents are. I mean,
there are movies though, like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and all those. There are movies, or what's the other one with Brad Pitt?
Snatch.
Snatch. Yeah, Snatch.
Yeah.
They have the accents, and they still get it through because Guy Ritchie's involved or something. But I think it's hard to get them.
That's the only explanation I can come up with, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense at all. You would have found somebody to release this theatrically, and then at least go to videotape. I mean, this is a silly thing to be concerned about because, most of the people would watch it on video or DVD anyway back in 2002. But yeah, I always felt sad about that because I felt like they had done something really great and it deserved to be seen by.
By the way, according to the IMDb, the movie go ahead.
You can't feel too bad for Neil Marshall though. He's gotten a pretty good career out of this flick.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you were saying Neil Marshall.
He went on to do The Descent, which is a terrifying horror film, in my opinion. Doomsday, which is kind of a fun little John Carpenter knockoff, and now he's one of the head directors on Game of Thrones.
Yeah, so he's not suffering. I totally. And the other, Adam and I were noticing that the other people connected to this film have stayed busy, weirdly enough, or oddly enough, or however you want to phrase this. They have been some of the force behind the whole Atlas Shrugged series of films, which none of us are particular fans of, but have a cult following. So, good on them. If that's, if you actually came up to me and said, Jason, we'll pay you a year's worth of salary to write an Atlas Shrugged script, I would totally do it.
Really?
Absolutely.
I guess for the year's worth of salary, but Jason is definitely not what
Anne Rand would approve of that line of thinking. Ayn Rand would approve.
Yeah, you're right. That's, yeah. She's not.
What Ayn Rand would not approve of is continuing to make Atlas Shrugged movies if the first one did not make money. Oddly enough.
Envision. Yeah, oh no, I agree completely. But they've got to be making money. Nobody's going to end up putting up that kind of money to keep making them if the first one fails. And I know this didn't they crowdfund this?
But anyway, we should be talking about Dog Soldiers.
I have no idea. I was just thinking like his Dark Materials. They made the first one, but not the. We've seen a bunch of movies. We've seen a bunch of trilogies not make it past the first chapter. Yes, like The Bridge to Terabithia. That's another one, oddly enough, which was really pretty good. David Strathairn. Okay, now we've really gone far afield. So let's come back to the Highlands.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yes,
okay, we're coming back to the Highlands, so I'm going to tell my Highlander story now because you wouldn't let me tell it earlier. And yes, exasperated sigh. Okay. Exasperated sigh. Go ahead. Yes.
Go ahead.
I always get exasperated sighs from Jason. Anyway, so my darling, brilliant, talented husband. See, this is why I win. This is why I win the listeners over. Wrote the first novel based on the Highlander TV series, and so we got to go to a conference, to Highlander Con, and he was a guest. So we got to go into the green room and meet, and like the actual stars of the show were there. And I have never had a bigger crush on anyone except maybe Harry Connick Jr. that was like a TV personality as I had on Adrian Paul. And so when I got to see him, I flipped out. I was like the dorkiest fangirl of all time. I felt like I was in the room with an immortal, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so bowled over. So I asked to get a picture taken with him and Mythos, the other guy, Peter Wingfield, and Jason had to take the picture, and Jason was so mortified. He was like, I'm really surprised he didn't divorce me that day. Because he was like, I can't believe we're guests and you're asking to take a picture in the guest room. But I have that picture. I will always have that picture. I will always treasure it. And those guys don't remember this, and they don't care.
Your logic is pretty good there, actually. your logic is like, you know what? They don't even remember the conversation. Whereas
of course not. It's just another annoying fan person.
But I still stand by the notion that if you're in if you're in a green room,
no, I know,
famous people, you don't take out a camera.
I know, faux pas, whatever, blah blah blah. Anyway, so we're talking about the timing of the movie, how it came out in 2002, and according to the IMDb, it probably takes place on the 1st and 2nd of September 2001 because England did, in fact, beat Germany 5-1, as they mentioned in the movie, and it's a full moon night, which, by the way, tonight's the second full moon night, and this month we're going to have 2 full moons, so we'll have a blue moon at the end of the month, which hasn't happened since August 2012, so there's some trivia for you.
Wow, I feel like I'm listening to Jack Horkheimer back in the
Oh, in the Scottish Highlands, there's some people backpacking.
Yes. All right. Golly, we're going to have to cut all this stuff.
What?
We're going to clean so much up in this imaginary post that someday we're going to do. And this all right.
This is all, well, the Highlander part wasn't relevant, but that was relevant.
All right.
Last part.
Luckily, there's really only 5 parts of this film. And
it's not complicated. It's not a complicated picture.
So we open up with a very, very traditional horror movie opening, which is we got a boy and a girl. They're backpacking in the Highlands of Scotland, and and this is all practical, beautiful sets. They're among trees. It's Luxembourg, but it doesn't matter. And they get eaten by a werewolf. This scene goes real fast. They're making out.
Well, she gives him a silver letter opener. That's the important thing.
Right. That's the only important piece here, really, is that she hands over a silver dagger, a silver letter opener, because they're celebrating whatever it is, their relationship.
His novel has been published. He's a writer.
Oh my God! You actually remembered the plot of what happened to these kids. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
No, they were dead so soon that I literally put out whatever they were talking about. But you're right. Okay. So yes, they wind up dead. And so immediately now you cut to a much more exciting scene, which lets you know, hey, I'm in a different kind of experience, because you cut from them getting sliced up by something that tears into actually slowly unzips the zipper on their tents and then tears them up. And now we cut to Kevin McKidd, who is the delightful Scottish actor from Grey's Anatomy, and he is, running through the woods. He's being pursued by soldiers, and we find out that he's in the middle of Special Forces training. He's supposed to evade capture. He's been evading them for like days. They're using a dog. And Drew, do you want to explain the interesting drama of the dog that goes on here?
Well, there is a Captain Ryan, who is the captain of the Special Forces unit and a bit of a tool, has to be said, who the dog eventually catches up to Soldier Boy, I can't think of the character's name right now. I can remember the plot line, but I can't remember the character's name.
There you go. Are you talking about Spoon?
What now?
What are we talking? Oh, no, Cooper.
Cooper. Yeah, that's right, Cooper. He catches up to Cooper, and Ryan comes up and says, okay, you failed because you did not eliminate your enemy's ability to track you. To which Cooper says, I will not kill, I am capable of killing a dog, but I will not kill that dog for no reason. This is just a war game. It's not real. And which Cooper tells him, well, you'll never make it in Special Forces, and shoots the dog in front of him. And when then he decides to deck, Cooper decks not Private, but Captain Ryan.
Yeah. That's right. And then that sends Cooper back to the Army. And so we've established something really, man, this is really good. I watch these things and I always learn so much about writing, about how you can do things by skipping over a lot of scenes if you're clever. Because we establish a lot here. We have a save the cat moment because Kevin McKidd does something nice. He doesn't want to shoot a dog. We have a jerk-ass moment because we introduce Ryan, who's an officer who wants to hire McKidd, which means that McKidd is just that good. It means he's super talented, so they told us that. Also told him that he's a rebel and he's not going to do that, so he's going to go back to the Army. Also that Ryan is a tool, as you say, and he's obsessed with his own authority and all of that, and that he's willing to shoot a dog for no reason.
Which is kind of funny when considering where he ends up.
Right. So all of this stuff gets right, and there's stuff that's being laid for the future. It's extremely efficient, to lay out, because I'm always writing and I'm going, we need a scene that sets up what a jackass this character is, and we need a scene that sets up how horrible this situation is. And what this movie is doing is it can put it all into one conversation that involves also a chase and the firing of a weapon. I mean, that's pretty awesome. So I don't know. I found that to be very educational. So anyway, now we cut to
it's 4 weeks later, and a British Army unit is being flown in for war games against Special Forces.
Right. So it's
in the Highlands of Scotland.
Yeah, and it's going to be Cooper, who we just met, and his army guys, or squaddies as they call them, up against Ryan, Captain Ryan, and his Special Forces. That's the plan. Is they're going to basically march around one another for a while and then do some fighting tomorrow. Is the idea. And so now we meet the squaddies, and the squaddies are led by Sean Pertwee, who is about 15 or so years older than Cooper, and has kind of Cooper has a Scottish accent. Pertwee has I don't recognize his accent, but it's slightly working class, but very matter of fact, and he's basically like Warren Oates in the Stripes, in a sense, maybe a little nicer than that guy, but think about this, Adam, if you were to remake this in the United States,
right,
this could have been Warren Oates.
It really could have.
And and they're they know that it's going to be not till like tomorrow that they're going to meet up with their opponents in this war game. And when we say war game, we mean, they're going to go run around shooting one another with blanks. They've even got all of these blank suppressors on their rifles, because if you're shooting a blank, this is a very interesting thing that Julia and I were reading about, and I guess I had heard about this before. A blank is a round that goes into a weapon, but it includes a bit of wadding, usually paper, cardboard, what have you. And so when you fire a blank, like on a movie set, it
Right.
always shoots out a projectile, a paper projectile, but nevertheless one that's moving at the speed of a
Which
bullet.
is how Brandon Lee died.
And this
there
is
was
how
still
Brandon
a little,
Lee died.
yeah, a little
That's right.
Well, I think Brandon Lee, there was a round actually in the chamber.
No, I
I
don't
think
think it was around.
No,
I think
it was a
a
piece of metal.
piece of metal that was left over from.
Okay,
like
so
fragments.
Julia, not Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee had the piece of metal. It was John Eric
But it was,
Hexum who killed himself.
It was Hexum who actually had.
Yeah, but I'm
actually,
saying that with Brandon Lee, they shot a blank, and it just so happened that there was a little piece of metal in there, and that's what killed him. But it was still because of the paper that he got shot.
Really?
I mean,
Well, okay. We shouldn't debate about whether the paper pushed the metal or the metal was in fact the primary cause. John,
But there was
a
a
better
piece of metal in his
So they
body.
got these crazy clips on the edge of their guns.
Yes. The point of those things is that they're going to block this piece of paper that will fly out so that you don't injure somebody if you point a blank weapon at them, or if you point a weapon at them and fire a blank. And I was just pointing out that civilians make this mistake all the time, and John Eric Hexum shot himself in the head with a gun because he didn't understand that blanks were still dangerous. Anyway, they're running around, they've got these suppressors,
Sure.
and so later on they're going to take those things off because they're going to realize that they're endangered. But it's pretty cool. At the beginning, you see them with these brightly colored widgets on the end of their rifles. So it's very soon after that they come across. They get to know one another, and they're singing and they're doing whatever it is that they do. They're just gossiping, and we get to know this troupe in the same way that in any war movie you get to know the various characters. The only other one that even stands out, besides Pertwee, who's the leader, and Cooper, who we already know is the hero because we met him first in his own scene, is Spoon, who is tall, beefy, belligerent, and a fighter. And
he's not exactly what I call tall and beefy. He is a fighter. I would say
tall. Go ahead. Yes.
They describe Joe as being tall.
Oh, that's true.
There's a character called Joe who is tallish, but Spoon, I would say, is more along the lines of kind of a dangerous little man.
He's muscled. He's more muscled.
He's muscled, but I wouldn't say he's big. Like he's kind of got the Rorschach build going on.
I'll take that. Okay. All right. Yeah, you're right. If you think of the way Rorschach is built, although man, that guy was wiry. Yeah, but still, I'm with you. I'm with you. He's a scrappy, like the line in Fight Club where he says "skinny guys."
And Spoon gets the best line in the movie, but I don't want to talk about it till the
yes.
Best, maybe the most manliest death in any horror film.
Yeah.
Although it reminds me a lot of the one in Day of the Dead when I'll remember it by the time I get there.
Yeah, but that guy goes out like a bitch. This guy goes out like a champ.
All right then. Okay, we'll get there. Okay. Anyway, they come across. How is it that they wind up? Oh yeah. Well, the first thing that happens is a cow gets thrown into their camp, like out of nowhere.
A mutilated cow.
Yes. Just gets dropped, a cow, by the way, which is a big thing. It's like the size of a motorcycle, gets thrown into their camp. And so immediately they think maybe that the special forces are screwing around with them, or maybe some animal killed it or whatever. So they're on their guard, but they're not yet totally freaked out. It is the next morning when they go looking for the special forces, and what they find is a completely obliterated camp and one living survivor, which is, it turned out, the dickwad Captain Ryan, who we knew from the beginning. Ryan is severely injured, and he is babbling, and he says there was supposed to be only one of them. He doesn't give them a lot of information, but it makes it clear that there's some danger out here that Ryan knew about. Immediately at that point, Pertwee says, okay, well, we're under real danger, and so it's time to change out your rounds, get rid of the blanks, get rid of those suppressors on the end, put in some real weapons. We're now in a live.
And if Little Red Riding Hood shows up, I expect you to tune the bitch.
Yes, yeah. Just it's fantastic because the music at this point is doing all of this heavy drum stuff. This doom doom, it's cool. It's really neat. The movie's very good in the same way that Aliens would, at just sort of getting you excited about what's going on. Now, what I'm trying to figure out is how do they get from this point to really all of Act 2? Because this point where they say, let's take the suppressors off, that's really the twist.
Well, they're trying to they try to radio for help. With not much luck, because the radio is damaged. And then when the sun starts to go down, they hear these really god awful screams, which we must surmise are people turning into werewolves.
And it's about that time that they're out on the road, and they come across a woman in a Range Rover who picks them up and says,
the werewolves attack them, and some of them are killed. Appropriately named Bruce Campbell is killed, and Sergeant Wells is chewed on by a werewolf, and they manage to scoop his guts up, get to the road, and then they are picked up by the woman, who says that there's a farmhouse nearby and they should go hole up in the farmhouse.
Oh, you're right. This is where Sean Pertwee, Sergeant Wells, is injured, and he's super injured because he's been slashed open at the abdomen.
Yeah, his intestines are hanging out.
And boy,
which is why I said this is a gory movie, and Jason tried to argue with me.
I'm just saying.
I would say in defense of what Jason is saying, I think this is a different kind of. This is not horror movie gore. This is more like what you would see in a war movie, where someone is. I will agree with you that it is a gory movie, but it's not gory the same way Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 is a gory movie. It's not even the same way that a Hammer movie is gory. This is battlefield injuries.
Yeah, I mean, he's going, hey, my guts are out. There's even some humor in all of that, and I'm going to push them back in. This movie has a wicked sense of humor. I mean, there is a reason why they call it a horror comedy, even though I don't totally agree with that. Yeah, I don't either. But I agree with you. There's a lot of humor in this. Julia, my main point about gore is that, yes, there's guts and there's heads and there's, like hands flying off and stuff like that. But look, I mean, this isn't Make Them Die Slowly is my point. This is not Cannibal
Yes,
Ferox.
but if you say somebody is pretty, then you don't go, it's not Angelina Jolie. I mean, she's pretty. She doesn't have to be or whatever you consider to be the prettiest of the pretty. So it's gory. It's just not the goriest that there is in the world. I get that.
Well, I'm not even saying that it's not gory. I'm saying that the style is different. This is not.
Yes. I will accept this. I will.
Okay.
I will acknowledge that is true.
I thought that what's the movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger has to Total Recall. Total Recall was gorier than this movie. Oh my
God! I'll spend 10 more minutes about movies that are gorier than this movie. Go.
Okay. All right, fine. But this is pretty gory. These guys' guts hanging out. They have to stick him back in. And so the point is, they're establishing now that they've got two people who are way injured. Which is Ryan and now Wells. So I keep calling.
Well, the two authority figures are also extremely injured. That's important.
Which means that McKidd starts to act, even before there's anything said about it, McKidd starts to act with a little bit more authority and sort of ordering everybody around, because everybody accepts his level of authority. And I got an echo there. Does somebody have a speaker or something going? Okay.
No.
All right, no worries. We'll take that out in post. That's no big deal. So, okay, they get picked up by a lady driving a Range Rover. She says, I'm a zoologist. I'm driving you. There's a house around here that I know some people here in the woods. I'm here studying animals. It's all very normal. So why don't you come with me? We'll go to this house and we'll get you picked up. This goes so fast. All of a sudden we're in a car with this lady. This takes like 45 seconds of screen time. It is disorienting, weird, and I think it's that way on purpose. I mean, in the same way that, like, if you think of I don't know, Hoffman getting into the car with William Devane in The Marathon Man. All of a sudden, he's been rescued, and William Devane just starts shouting things and says, "I'm taking you to a safe house," blah, blah, blah. It is disorienting and intended to be disorienting, that all of a sudden somebody's come to our rescue. They go to a farmhouse, and they're acting like army guys, so they immediately start, like, fortifying it and trying to figure out what kind of food there is, trying to figure out whether they can rest. And that starts.
And they eat their sketchy, possibly made of people soup.
Right. There's soup on the stove. So yeah, this house they go to supposedly is occupied by a farm family, but they clearly left in a hurry because there's food on the stove, the table is made, all the lights are on, there's a fire. So, whoever lives here has just split a few minutes ago. There's no way we don't think these are the werewolves, by the way. I can't imagine for all the world seeing this and not thinking, clearly these are the werewolves. There's a possibility that maybe they got eaten by the werewolves. But I think it's more likely that you've entered the monster house.
Well, like I said, they're already teasing you because there's the whole... They're already teasing you because there's the whole business of, what kind of meat is this in the soup? I don't know. It tastes like pork.
Yeah, but I disagree because in my worldview of werewolves, they don't have houses and cook meals. Those are people that do that. And so, yeah, I see that those could be the people who became the werewolves, but the fact that they're werewolves right now, running around killing people, and we're also at the house like cooking meals, just doesn't. Those
these are different kinds of werewolves, though. These are almost like
serious. I'm saying it doesn't. I would never occur to me watching a movie about werewolves that the werewolves in werewolf form prepare meals and live in a house.
No, presumably they walk around like people all day.
That's what I'm saying.
And they made food, and then they finally were overtaken by their need to become werewolves, and they left.
But that's not actually how. When we come to the end, that's not really how it is. Like they don't become werewolves. They don't get overtaken. They sort of decide, okay, I'm ready now. I'm ready to be a werewolf. It seems like it's all very conscious on
so
them.
with that,
there's a whole internal debate over, is it like needing to take a pee or is it like needing to take a shit? So it's. I don't feel like that's ever really the rules of turning into a werewolf or ever fully established. But these are obviously different kinds of werewolves than what we're used to because they're keeping mummified trophies of the people they've eaten and their stuff in their basement, which almost makes them like serial killers.
Yeah. You're getting that Ed Gein thing going on where they're keeping stuff. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And by the way, to me, I associate that with the United States, and I always wonder, if you're Neil Marshall, how influenced have you been with what you know?
Well, there was a famous, I don't remember which century, but there was a famous family of Scottish cannibals, and I'm blanking on the name and the folklore on it right now, but actually, Tim Seeley used it in Hack Slash. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was also referenced in. Well,
and to roll this back.
It says Sonny Bean is the story. I just looked it up.
There you go.
And to roll this back to military horror, don't forget that in extreme situations particularly with soldiers, often highly trained soldiers under great duress, they have been known to take trophies from some of their kills when they've sort of gone around the bend. We've seen this before. And so it's an interesting intersection of these two kind of conditions.
Right. This sort of folklore is not quite the word. This sort of cultural relevance or cultural awareness that people have of the stuff that they're seeing. You're seeing trophies. You're seeing a crazy. We've mentioned every time we watch a movie from the late '60s, early '70s. We always talk about how this has tinges of the violent hippies. This has tinges of Manson, and that's because that's the language that Americans are speaking. So with what you guys are saying and what Julia said about and Drew about this cannibal family in Scotland, I think the viewers of this movie watching it in England, that's probably one of the first things they'll think of, as opposed to one of the last. So it's fun. It makes it kind of like an X-Files sort of thing, where you go, I get it. It's a monster, but also it's kind of a wink at this torn from the headlines thing that I know about from my world. So they fortify this house that they've taken over, and basically the rest of this section, which goes on for the bulk of the movie, you can really just talk about your favorite bits from this, because it's really just a siege on the house as the wolves come back and slowly but surely try to figure out how to break into the house and kill all the soldiers. And
there's a lot of character interaction, which I feel like is where this movie really shines. Is you have the
yeah. So tell me about some of that. Yeah.
You don't normally have, deep relationships from men within, between several different men in American films is usually portrayed as a joke, in some sort of homophobic way.
Yeah.
Like this is portrayed completely straight-faced. These guys have a very deep bond. There's lots of joking and lots of, witty dialogue, but it's also you really get the sense that these guys care about each other. And then you have the opposite end of that. You have, Ryan, Captain Ryan, who we come to find out was using these soldiers as bait because they wanted the military wanted to capture an experimenter on a werewolf.
Right.
I think, Drew, that most military films portray men to have like a deep bond. Like
military films are the exception. Military films are the exception, and that's why I will say this is first and foremost a military film, because if this was like, say, just a bunch of normal guys versus werewolves or versus whatever monster, you would have a lot of fratty humor. Anytime. I think about Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead, has this very deep friendship between Ed and Shaun, but they're constantly cracking gay jokes at each other. There's none of that really here.
They don't have to do that. Isn't that funny? They can hang out, they can be intimate, they can have a close relationship, and there's no need to constantly reassure the audience, by the way, we are not homosexuals.
Yeah, there's none of that. There's even, there's the great line, Captain Wells or Sergeant Wells thinks he's going to die, and he starts talking about if he had a sister, Cooper would be the one guy he'd let marry his sister. It's really good. You care anytime somebody dies. There's actually, you can feel kind of a loss, and there's a lot of death in this movie, and even Campbell, the Bruce Campbell character that we mentioned earlier, when he dies, he's the first one to go. They're like, oh man, Bruce, and the rest of the movie, Sergeant Wells is racked with guilt that he couldn't save Bruce, from his fate. This is good stuff, and it is because they fused the war and the monster movie genres here. That's what you're getting, because a lot of the times in a horror film you would not have that depth of loss that this movie has. So
and there is I love the closeness that happens between Sean Pertwee and Kevin McKidd, where Pertwee begins to suspect that he's going to die, and so he says, the squad is yours, and so forth. The other thing that I wanted to mention in this whole section, basically it breaks out into the sections where the wolves start coming around. The wolves are trying to come through the windows. Eventually, the wolves get smart and cut the power, right. And then the good guys get a plan, and that's what starts to take us to Act 3. But before we get to Act 3, you have a fight with Spoon, who is truly insane. This character of Spoon dares to go bare knuckle against this 8-foot-tall werewolf that's
that's really in the finale.
Is it during the finale?
Yeah, that's really in the finale. That's at the very end of the movie. Like the thing that I think is important in this section is that we find out that Ryan is turning into a werewolf, which is, leading to the reveal that he's starting to see he was about to die, and now his wounds seem to be getting better, and then he turns into a werewolf, gets tossed out on his ears by the soldier.
Forgotten that
he gets impaled. He gets impaled on a broadsword that they found. And
well, yeah, because they have this whole section where they go through the house and they just try to take inventory of what weapons they have, including swords, knives, and, as we've discussed, my personal favorite, pans. They have frying pans.
Well, that's what spoon and stuff with.
Yes. One of the guys, I think it is Spoon who finds it in a big trunk. He finds this enormous broadsword, and we're going to see it come back several times. I'm making a face right now because it's very painful, some of the ways that it comes back. Pretty soon Ryan in werewolf form gets stabbed by it.
I can't think of any other movie other than Monster Squad that really plays up the invincibility of werewolves so well. When something
can only be killed with a silver bullet or some silver thing or other through its heart, that means, in theory, that anything else is fair game. That basically anything else is going to leave, almost no impression on this character. But so. Yeah, they shoot the crap out of these werewolves, and in theory they can hit them with cars and whatnot.
And it seems like it hurts them, they don't like getting shot, but they are just going to go regenerate and then keep on coming.
Right, like they're Wolverine in that sense. Yeah. I'm sure that there are limits to this. I'm sure that if you ground them down to hamburger by dropping them into some industrial thing or other, that they probably wouldn't keep moving like something out of Tales from the Crypt. But I don't know. They're magical, so maybe they would. If you chop them to pieces but used no silver.
According to Monster Squad, the pieces will just fly back together. So who knows with these things? But
my goodness, I had forgotten that. I had completely. Yeah. That's true. All right. Is there anything else in this siege section that we need to talk about before we?
Well, let's see. Joe is killed. Trying to get another car out of a barn.
Yeah. The truck.
Which is so much like Night of the Living Dead. Isn't that funny?
Yes.
Because remember they have to send the teenagers out to go get the car. They have to gas up the truck.
Yeah, gas. Yeah, and that whole thing blows up.
Yeah. Oh. Well, yeah, because they don't have the keys, if I recall, to the gas tank, and so they end up making a hash of it and getting gasoline all over themselves, and they barbecue themselves so the zombies can eat them. This is something similar to that. What happens is the farm girl who has led them to this house says, well, there's a vehicle in that barn over there, and what we only find out after it's a little bit too late is that she has given up on the notion that these guys are going to be her ticket out, and so she is leading them to their own death in that barn. That the werewolves.
Yeah, she is actually aware. She is actually one of the werewolves.
But she seems to have been hoping that somehow or another they could carry her away, and that would mean something to her. She really seems to, in my mind, it appears to me when she says, I really had hopes for you, whatever line she uses, it involves, my hope was that you were going to get me out of here, out of these woods, out of this family.
Right. But now I've given up, and basically I've let them in.
Yeah. But what was going to happen? The interesting thing is, let's say they did get her out of there. Then what? I mean, there's no notion, maybe in the city there might be a cure. Maybe she's just having.
No, but I think she says she didn't want to be part of this dysfunctional family. It must be, she's part of this pack, which just must be terrible. And so even if she was going to be a werewolf somewhere else, I don't know how much her condition was something that she could stave off or whatever else, but it seems like anything would be better than being, with Ryan and this pack of wolves out here doing all this. So even if she was just away, that would be amazing. But I was just amazed that she just gave up on them and just let him in.
Right. That's exactly right.
And then started turning.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one would assume that they have some kind of hold on her. I mean, if it's their family or if it's just because she's another werewolf or whatever, or if they're gonna wake up in the next morning and they're gonna be like, "Lady, like what were you thinking? The soldiers. I mean, come on. We're werewolves, all right."
Well, plus there's that same urgency that you were talking about, where they need to change into werewolves. So probably this all gets more difficult and tougher for her as the evening wears on. And so by this time, of course, she's on the other side. I'm turning into a wolf, and you guys are all screwed. I've led half of you to your death, and the rest of you.
I find the line "it's that time of the month" to be a bit unfortunate. That is one of the only things in this movie that makes me really cringe. I was like, that was a very on the nose choice.
Yeah, but it was interesting. There are a couple of things which is funny because that was a tough one, but there was there's so many there's so many homages and tongue-in-cheek references. We mentioned earlier about Bruce Campbell being named, H.G. Wells being named. Spoon is interesting because after this bit that Jason is talking about where Spoon meets his end, they go, "Where's Spoon? Where's Spoon?" And someone goes, "There is no Spoon," which is clearly a Matrix reference from '99. Which
yes, that's right.
You just go, "Oh my God, really? Oh, sure, why not?"
Well, especially at that point, the Matrix was not even that old of a movie.
Yeah.
That didn't bother me nearly as much.
And there's a bunch of references to Zulu, according to.
Absolutely, yeah. Because that's another Siege story. But the time of the month thing is so like just knee-jerk, old-fashioned misogyny that it strikes the wrong note for me. Maybe it wouldn't strike the wrong note.
No, it strikes the wrong note for everybody.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like fan kind of nodding to the fans things. Like the girl Megan's playing on the piano. She's playing Debussy's Claire de Lune, which is the theme.
Yeah.
And it's also a nod to An American Werewolf in London. And then they've got a Kobayashi Maru reference for Star Trek 2, and it's just all kinds of
Kobayashi Maru.
When they discovered the tracking chip in the radio, Spoon mentions the Kobayashi Maru scenario.
That's crazy.
It's just random things. So it's just like any kind of fanboy or fangirl that's watching this kind of goes, "Oh yeah, I know what this is."
Which I appreciate. I mean, it's like 5 fans, 4 fans.
Well, I do a lot of that too in my own writing. I'm not really wagging my finger at that. Like
no, it's not a bad thing at all. It's different than the that time of the month reference, which I totally agree, Drew, is just one of those notes that you go, oh. The other stuff is fine.
If we were catching this before it went out, you'd go, you know what, my vote is cut that line before we go into production or before we release this. I think
ending it. I think they could have ended it on "You think I like being part of this fucked up family," and you would have gotten
that's a good one. You're right. That's the other problem.
You would have gotten the point across.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the monologue comes across as a series of one-liners, which is always a problem. When you have like one sort of gag after another, it always falls flat. And then you can look. And some movies just make a dreadful sin of this. This one is really pretty slick. But the references, man, I love it when a movie just stacks up the references far and wide. It makes me really happy. So, yeah, at that point, the girl Megan lets all the werewolves into the house. And so
that is a beautiful shot of her with all the werewolves behind her, I have to say. Like,
oh, my gosh, yeah.
Now, did that remind you just for a moment of Aliens as well? The sort of the composition and the...
totally.
Yeah, there's something about it that gave me sort of a sense of an alien and aliens, just that particular composition, just that moment. Looked good.
Yeah. And it's really, the way that this resolves is pretty cool because you have Wells and Cooper are together fighting upstairs and moving their fight downstairs by doing all kinds of things. They're going through walls, they're going through floors by shooting or pushing their bodies through different blockages. They're doing all kinds of stuff to fight these monsters. And meanwhile, is that the point? This is the point where Spoon.
This is the point where you get Spoon boxing a werewolf in a kitchen. He stabs the werewolf with a butter knife repeatedly until it breaks, hits him with a pan. It just honestly beating the crap out of. If this was a human being he was fighting, the human would have been dead several times over. He's just beating the holy shit out of this werewolf. And eventually the werewolf, starts lashing back, shoves him up against the wall, starts beating him up. And Spoon gets, again, the best line in the movie as the werewolf is about to start eating him. I hope I give you the shits, you fucking wimp. That is going out like a badass. Okay?
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It is fantastic. Yeah, at the point where he knows that he's not going to be able to win anymore, that's just fantastic.
Frankly, that werewolf kind of has it coming because as a mere mortal, Spoon is kicking the crap out of him.
Yes, no, that's true. That was really, really good. And I remember when I came out of this movie back in 2002, that was one of the things that was freshest in my mind was how exciting the fist fight between Spoon and the werewolf was.
I think about like the thing that makes me think of, which is in Jason Takes Manhattan. There's a high school boxing champion that gets in a boxing match with Jason Voorhees, and is punching him right in the hockey mask until, because it's Jason, it doesn't do anything. And eventually the guy gets worn out and Jason just punches his head clean off. It's a similar thing, but the combatants are portrayed is more or less even, and in fact Spoon kind of has the advantage in terms of pure combat ability.
Absolutely, yeah. This is played much more exciting. That one comes across kind of like a gag, and that's okay, But in Jason Manhattan, that's a laugh. This is more of a sort of there's a laugh here, but it's a macho, alien style kind of thing where, just like all the characters in Aliens, as they get torn up, there's always this sort of macho funniness, but also that kind of maudlin war story thing going on that everybody loves in movies like that. So, yeah. Wells also gets a fantastic hero's death, because he realizes that what he's going to do is set off the gas in the, because the gas stove, they've very efficiently shown us the gas stove many times. So Wells is going to light a match or whatever he's going to do to set it off. But at the last minute, as the wolves are coming in and they're all over the place, he is completely failing to get these matches lit as they are damaging him. He is dying and going to die, and so
he's turning into a werewolf. Is what's doing.
Right, yeah,
right.
And he ends up cutting the gas hose with a butcher knife. Not a butcher knife, a cleaver. So he just goes wham, cuts through it, and then he hits the little pilot light on the engine and on the oven. Good of him to remember where the pilot light was, and it sparks, and that sets off the explosion. That completely obliterates this farmhouse and, in theory, the werewolves within it, except, of course, that Cooper has wound up in the basement. And this is really the final action sequence of the movie. Because I gotta admit, at this point in the movie, I'm like, how the hell can there be more of this movie? I mean, I was ready for Cooper to just crawl out of the basement and that would be the end.
Right.
But because he's the main character, he has to have the final showdown. So he's down there, and we find out he's not alone. Werewolf Ryan is still there, and we could recognize Werewolf Ryan because he has a big broadsword sticking out of his chest, because he's been stabbed and run through from the back. And he nearly rips Cooper's head in half by trying to shove this sword into Cooper's mouth. And I don't even remember how Cooper manages to get out of that. How does
he
Cooper...
finds the silver letter opener because these werewolves, for whatever reason, keep trophies of their victims. So he finds the silver letter opener, which is kind of stupid on werewolf families.
Yeah, don't leave that laying around.
Yeah, like why would they keep that? You think they would have just chunked that in the river or something?
Well,
But,
she even makes the comment that, what would werewolves really leave a bunch of
what self-respecting werewolf would have silverware? And, he stabs Ryan with the letter opener, which causes some sort of weird CGI flesh rot, which I guess we are to assume is him losing his ability to regenerate or whatever, and then he blows Ryan's head off.
Right, and that's it's a magic. It weakens him, and so then Cooper is able to blow Ryan up, and then that is well and truly the end of the film, except of course the funny headlines that happen at the end. And the headlines are cute. Yeah. There's this stuff.
Because they've been taking pictures, they've been using the flash thing throughout in this farmhouse, and he leaves a picture.
Oh, that's right. For whatever reason, the werewolves don't like the flash on the camera.
I completely forgot about that detail. That's right. Yeah, they use that to sort of frighten away werewolves in the same sense that in an old movie you might wave a torch at a monster. In this case, because this is a modern thing, they instead use flashbulbs, which is great, I guess. The real problem, of course, is that, I don't know, if you've ever, it just depends on the flashbulbs you have, because the ones I remember, you only had like 6. These things were like guns. You only had so many shots, and you'd have to change the
My problem with it is a flashbulb will stop them, but an assault rifle won't.
Right?
They're very scared.
I mean, I'm not going to hype the movie. I'm not going to spend too much time meditating on that. Because, again, unlike most werewolf movies, they don't ever have the big speech that lays out the werewolf rules. Like, you just kind of have to assume, and
everybody knows them.
Yeah, well, or that they don't know exactly what. There is like the great scene where they're all sitting around going like werewolves. And, they kind of mull over it for a second. I was like, well, I guess that makes about as much sense as anything. And
yeah. One thing I want to mention before we go to the final thoughts, one thing I really like about this movie is that as they're going through the night and the wolves keep coming back with one assault after another, these guys have limited amounts of ammunition, and they count it, and they keep letting us know how many more rounds they have. And that's really kind of cool. I mean, because just like sometimes in a John Ford movie, you'd have John Wayne would talk about the fact that, listen, he's already been running his horse for 8 hours. By God, he's got to get this horse to rest and drink some water, or the horse is going to die. So he's got to stop, no matter how much we want to keep moving. And in other movies, cowboys sort of don't exist with those rules, right? And in this one, they don't have limitless ammo. They have to go, look, we're down to 20 rounds. So that means no matter what, we only get to pull the trigger 20 more times, and it's that's refreshing that they keep doing that. And I thought that was an unusual touch. And and there were several things kind of like that, where they're just constantly aware, how many more hours is it until sunlight? It has a very tactical feel that makes you feel scared and feels very real.
Part of me kind of would love to have seen a version of this movie where the guys lasted out until dawn. The werewolves turn back into people, and then the soldiers come out and just beat the crap out of this normal farm family.
Yeah.
Like, well, tables have turned now.
Yes.
God, what a great army.
All right, so final thoughts. Let's get our final thoughts on this. The order that we went, I think we'll go the same way. Drew, Final thoughts, what people should look for in this movie if they haven't seen, what to keep an eye out for, whatever you want to tell them.
There's a lot of there's still sequel talk to this movie. I'm glad there isn't a sequel. I think this is one of those movies that is so complete to itself. You don't need that. You can go off and make other military horror. You can go off and make other werewolf movies. On that note, I want to say thank you to everybody who has taken part in this retro. Thank you to Jamie and Tony who are not here with us tonight. Thanks to Adam and Jason and Julia for indulging my very, 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 very fetishistic love of werewolf movies. I'm glad that I was able to get in a few of my favorite classic werewolf movies and a couple of more cult classic type werewolf movies. And obviously this is a topic that you could even go deeper into, but that's maybe another retrospective at another time. But thank you. I've had so much fun the last 4 weeks.
Excellent. I'm really happy. Julia, final thoughts on Dog Soldiers?
I think I've said plenty. I did enjoy the thing that we were talking about with the family, the werewolf family, and kind of how she, she's protecting them, and I don't know, I thought that was kind of neat. But I don't regret having seen it. I probably wouldn't have seen it if not for this podcast. But it was not my least favorite, not my most favorite of our podcast movies. I don't really know what else to say about that, so I think I'll just stop there.
All right, very good. Adam, any final thoughts on Dog Soldiers?
Well, I think in the collection of movies that you've been doing over the last number of weeks, some of which I've been in on, some of which I've listened to the podcast and seen. This is, I think, an important one because it's again, if you really like it, if you're really passionate about it, if you wanted to see a sequel of it, or if you really didn't care for it, you can't deny the fact that it's important because it really did fairly successfully blend the genres, twist genres in a way that made it incredibly unique. You could come for the action and stay for the werewolves, and that would be completely fine. And I think for that reason it kind of stands alone. And I agree with Drew. I think that I know that I think a trilogy or something was originally planned for this, and people have talked about it in a number of different ways. But I think it kind of stands alone, and I think it's important for everybody who likes this kind of thing to probably see it, to see what it could be. I'm glad that I've seen it. It's good. Not my favorite, but it's important for definitely what it is, and it has some really good moments in it and unique moments.
Very cool. Very cool. My only thought is that I'm really glad we did this because this is a movie that is basically like no werewolf movie that I can think of. I mean, it's a movie that knows all the tropes of werewolf films and uses, absolutely none of them. So it's very unique. It's very fast. It's very pulse pounding. So it's a good one. I don't know how often it gets played, but I think if you like action, if you're an Aliens kind of guy, definitely this movie's where it's at. I know when I started doing sort of Dracula, Dog Soldiers was definitely on my mind, and Aliens, those two, So yeah, I'm really glad that we got a chance to go back and look at it. And I'm also very thankful that we got a chance to do the whole Werewolf series. I mean, I've seen some stuff that I wouldn't normally have seen or got a chance to go back and look at it and talk at it more deeply, especially like Werewolf of London, which I just really love. In no way in hell would I have seen Company of Wolves if we hadn't watched it last week. Not because I object to it, but because it's just unlikely that I would have found my way to it. You were saying something, Adam. I'm sorry.
No, I was laughing.
Ah.
It's so true.
Okay. Endorsements. This is the stuff that we are watching or listening to or paying attention to right about now that we want to share with other people. So, Drew, do you have anything that you want to point out to us?
Well, I have a thing that I'm enjoying, and I have a personal endorsement. I'll do the thing I'm enjoying first. I went to the Austin Books Sidekick store the other day, and I managed to pick up for a very, very good price a hardcover of all of the Jack Kirby Challengers of the Unknown series. For those of you who are not familiar with this, Jack Kirby is the comic book artist in a lot of respects, and he had a hand in creating a good bulk of the Marvel characters. But Challengers of the Unknown is a DC series, and it's sort of seen by a lot of people as a prototype for Fantastic Four. And the Silver Age Fantastic Four, the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby Fantastic Four, is my all-time favorite comic book. I love those comic books so much, but I've never been able to get around to reading Challengers of the Unknown. So when I saw this, I snatched it up, and my God, I just love it. So many crazy giant robots, or odd-looking aliens, multi-tentacled monsters, lots of just Silver Age insanity and everything that I love about vintage comic books. I just highly recommend it. If you're a Silver Age fan, if you're a Fantastic Four fan, to hunt this down. It's I got it for a steal. If you can, I don't know if you'll be able to get it as cheaply, but I would say it would be worth it. The full cover price. It was just been an amazing read so far, and I can't wait to finish it up. I found it very inspiring. My not thing that I'm enjoying, my very, very self-centered, selfish endorsement is that Austinites, all of you who live in Austin, this 4th of July, that's this Saturday, I have put together the 4th of July party for the Rattle Inn. It is going to be a hell of a show. We have Bat City Surfers starting out the show at 9 o'clock. That's bringing some surf rock to you. We have the Junkyard Mongrels following up after them, doing bluegrass things. And all the way from San Diego, California, we have the wonderful Hardful Hearts doing their unique brand of gothabilly. Then finally, my lovely wife and her talented ladies in Danger Cakes are going to finish up the night. That's the Red, White, and Blue Bash at Rattle Inn here in Austin, 21 and up, no cover. Be there or you're un-American.
Excellent. Julia, do you have any endorsements for us this week?
I would endorse once again, like I think I did last year, Extant, which is back for the summer. That's the Halle Berry show. It's speaking of lovable Grey's Anatomy doctors. Denny, who was actually not a doctor, but he was on the show for a while because he was the patient of one of the doctors. Anyway, and then became her lover. And I think they actually got married at one point. But anyway, the point is he's awesome. And so he is on the show now. But at the same time, this is a spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen the new episode and wants to watch it, they killed off my favorite ER hottie doctor.
Don't say any more.
No, I just said it.
Okay. All right.
I'm just like, wait a minute. Well, at least it looks like it appeared that way. I suppose it could be, and it not actually true. But
by the way,
Denny
has genre cred because that guy played the comedian in Watchmen.
Goran Vizniak.
No. I'm talking about the guy.
Oh, the guy.
He was also the dad in Supernatural.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't know that. Well, he's also the dad in that awesome movie. I think it's called Possession, about the Dybbuk demon.
Right.
Where the guy's daughter is being possessed, but
in the film.
Yeah, and it's the world of Judaism and Jewish rules, and so he has to go get some hard-hitting Hasidic motherfuckers to come and get this demon. It's great. It was one,
Anyway, Extant is really interesting. I think it's fun, and I recommend it. That's all.
Excellent. Adam, what about you?
I
actually don't have I don't have a recommendation this week. I was hoping to. I watched the first episode of True Detective, and I have the other one sort of on TiVo. I'll be watching it soon, and I'm watching it closely. But I'm not at the point where I have any kind of recommendations. I do have a question though. Having just been in Austin, Drew, have you been to the wax museum that you have there?
Yes, many times.
How is it?
Santor.
Is it cool?
It's pretty cool. I actually endorsed it one week, and they got a little memorabilia shop in there. They host mask making classes sometimes. The same people that own the Museum of the Weird own Santor, and it's not the biggest wax museum I've ever seen. It's small, but it's growing. But they've got a really good selection of vintage. It's very much geared towards classic monsters. They have the 31 Mr. Hyde and Nosferatu, the Karloff Frankenstein, a lot of stuff like that. In fact, I think the only concession to what you would call modern horror that they have at this point, I mean, their goal is to add a ton of things, but the last time I went through, they had the Alien from Alien, and that's not even modern anymore. What?
How long has this been there? That's brilliant.
It's on South Congress in less than a year.
Yeah, I saw it when I drove past it. I'd heard about it, didn't know where it was, and literally just a few days ago I saw it on South Congress, but I was on my way somewhere. So next time I'm in town, I felt like I would.
Next time you're in town, you should message me so we can meet in person.
I will. I think that would be really good. It seems amazing that we haven't actually met.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is crazy, but
I'll be going back.
Santor, House of Wax.
Yeah,
it's Castle. It's called Castle Santor.
I cannot believe it. Wow. Thank you for bringing this to our awareness, Adam, because, geez, that's pretty neat. It's a wax museum dedicated to classic horror, science fiction, and fantasy. Good Lord. Well, that's pretty neat. Okay. Wow. Okay. So what I will mention actually is a little bit of log rolling. There is a blog that I love called Too Much Horror Fiction, which I think I've mentioned before. They're a blog that's dedicated to just looking at really neat old horror books and paperbacks and so forth. And we had some fun on the page for Castle of Horror, just posting favorite paperback covers. If you haven't listened to the interview that we did with Will Erickson, who is the creator of that blog and in this really foremost expert in horror fiction of the 20th century, the interview is up. You can find it on the Castle of Horror, wherever you get your podcast. It's just the last episode before this one, and it is really neat. It was a very, very fun conversation because we talked about horror books and the death of paperbacks and what made paperbacks awesome in the 70s and so forth. And I recommend checking it out. So that's all I'll say. All right. We're going to take next week off for the 4th of July so everybody can blow things up and hopefully come back with all their fingers and toes. And after that, we will have an all-new retrospective. Should we announce what the retrospective is?
You should just go ahead and say it.
Yeah, man. We are going to do a Christopher Lee retrospective.
Nice.
Right. So be here 2 weeks hence, and we are going to start talking about Christopher Lee movies for at least 4. And who knows, we may go on. But I think we're down for 4, and it's going to be really neat. We're going to look at some stuff that people maybe don't look at all the time, but nevertheless are really within the realm of like what you'd expect and hope to discuss. So I know we're going to do Count Dracula. I know we're going to do Horror Hotel. I can't remember what else. I think The Wicker.
We also kicked around the idea of The Devil Rides Out and The Wicker Man.
Yeah, maybe both of those things. So who knows? And maybe Scars of Dracula. So I don't know. We haven't quite figured all of that out yet. But there are a couple, like I would kill myself if we didn't get to do Count Dracula. We got to do that one because it'll give us an opportunity to discuss Jess Franco for the first time as well. So cool, man. All right, guys. Thank you very, very much. Have a fantastic 4th of July. Everybody be safe, and I really appreciate you joining us.
Happy Independence Day.
Bye, guys.
Night.
Bye. Bye.